Good morning, Des Moines Christian. It's Mr. Nikkel here, Director of Spiritual Life and Middle School Assistant Principal, bringing your daily devotional again. And we have 1 week left next week of daily devotionals until May 15, I believe, and then we'll close the chapter on this semester's daily devotionals and then wait to see what happens in the future. Hopefully, we're all back together and we can have our devotionals in person. But if not, we'll keep these rolling and keep it going. But thanks for tuning into these along the way, and I appreciate everyone who's taking time to watch them. And so I actually just got back from being outside and taping our elementary, middle school chapel, and it's going to be a pretty fun one. So if you can, check it out. But I had used Matthew 13, the parable of the sower, for the content of that message, and I just continued to unpack it in my mind and thought I would bring it today as well for our daily Devo. So the interesting part in chapter 13 in the book of Matthew, right, is Jesus explains this, or he tells this parable. He begins with the parable, talking about how a sower, a farmer, throws this seed out and tries to grow this field, but some lands on a path and it's scorched by the sun and the birds eat it up, and some goes into rocks and it grows quickly and then it gets scorched by the sun and is dead. Some goes into thorns and it's quenched, it's suffocated and doesn't make it, and then some makes it to the good soil. And it's just so interesting to me that the disciples' response to that is that they are just bewildered. They can't figure it out. And they're getting so angry and upset with Jesus through this that they, almost after every parable, are pulling at his cloak and his garb and saying, just tell us what's going on. And Jesus kind of looks at them mercifully and goes, okay, you guys, come on. This is the simple message. And it's so interesting to me how Jesus has to unpack it all the time for them. And yet I look at ourselves and I reflect on our own wonderings of faith, our own questions of how life is going right now and what we're even going through, and how often we ask Jesus questions that are hard to answer, or things that we don't understand, or we pull at his garb, at his cloak on high, and we go, hey, just tell us what the meaning of this. And it often takes a journey down the road for us to really understand what happened backwards before us. And I think we need to remember that in this time here, while we are in the midst of this season, and we continue to be. Like, no one thought we would be here on May, I don't even know what the date is, May 7, and think about being in quarantine and self-isolated, or that we would even understand why, or the process. Like, there's so many wonderings and questions for now and for the future. And honestly, we're not going to get those answers until we've really journeyed into it and beyond it and can look back and think about it. There's a Aboriginal proverb, if you go back to my previous stories in the Daily Devo, that and the Aboriginals talked about and said, they said, walk into the future backwards. Because so often when we look ahead into the future, we get so worried about what's coming and how it's going to work. But if you're walking backwards, you have no clue what's coming. In fact, you're not even focused on it. You're not even looking into it, because you're actually focusing on all that has happened and looking at the lessons learned, so that whatever comes into view as you're walking backwards into the future, you can conquer. I think that's a little bit about how Jesus approached some of these things with his disciples and with us today. We get so worried and so anxious that we can't figure out the questions, the story, the meaning, know why it's all happening. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that we look beyond us into the past and we go, hey, what have I learned? What can I apply? How have I grown? What is it that God has done? Let's focus on that rather than what hasn't he done for us. The parable of the sower, with another version, another way to look at how God is so faithful and how Jesus will win the day again and again. Let's give that faith to him. Let's focus on him in this time. Don't get caught up in the meaning and the worry, but just bring it to the cross. Look in the past and see how faithful God has been. Make it a great day, DMC.